Hey, good Friday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. In today's video, we're going to talk about another major blast of cold air as we work into next week, certainly for early September standards, well below normal temperatures returning across the central to the eastern part of the country. For some areas, we did some research this morning in the Ohio Valley, close to where we're located at in Indiana. Could be maybe the coolest first week of September in 30 years. It was a very, very cool into August as well. So, just these cold fronts have continued to really pack a punch, and I think we've got more of the same as we go over the next couple of weeks. And then we'll get into late September. Could there be any kind of a moderation late in the month? We'll chat about that here later in this video. Let's start out first with just the overall pattern over the next 2 weeks. And you can see both week one and week two, top and bottom here, much cooler than normal for much of the central to eastern US. Really, both week one and week two pretty similar as a whole. Core of the above normal temperatures across parts of the western Canadian prairies and the Pacific Northwest. And guys, I want to continue to highlight we've been using this AI European ensemble model for the week two temperatures. The EPS, the GEFS, and we'll touch a little bit more on this here in a moment, have been too keen on warming things up in the extended range, and they've been underdone with these cold fronts. And this particular model, this AIFS ensemble, has done a much better job of seeing those. And so while we still have those in the forecast, I think that this particular piece of model guidance will be the solution that will see the cold fronts better. In terms of precipitation, with the cooler air, while there will be fronts and some storm systems still suppressing some of the moisture, the drier air kind of infiltrating these storm systems a little bit. If we zoom in here to the next 7 days on the Clarity platform and our future 7-day rainfall forecast, you can see best rainfall opportunities, maybe even some heavy rainfall potential across parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, eastern Kansas, western Iowa, but still, guys, in this corridor in here, just not seeing much in the way of appreciable rain through this region. Is it completely dry? No. As we work these fronts through, there probably will be messy rainfall opportunities, but this is an area that just continues to run dry. And in fact, a lot of the data, especially in parts of eastern Missouri and Illinois, the next 15 days keeps things really dry compared to normal. So, if you're in Minnesota, if you're in eastern Iowa, if you're in Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, there's going to be rain in here, but probably not all that widespread until you get further down into southern Kentucky and into Tennessee. In terms of how data has been verifying as of late, we've been talking about this in some of our reports, our ag and our energy reports. This was the EPS and the GEFS, their forecast this time last week for the 11 to 15 day time frame for the first 5 days of September. You can see especially the EPS tried to warm the temperatures up across the Midwest warmer than normal. The GEFS kept the warmth in the plains, still had some cooler air east, but it also tried to moderate things. Here's how this period is actually going to pan out. They completely have missed these cold fronts. And even with us leaning on the cooler side of data, even the coldest data has not done a good job picking up on the intensity of these fronts. And I really think that will continue to be an issue as we go forward. Obviously, data has trended colder and colder here as we've gotten towards this third to fifth front. We have another strong cold front targeted as we work towards the midway point of the month. And I want to kind of highlight the evolution that the EPS is seeing right now. First, let's talk about this front into next week. You can see it colder than normal air moderates very briefly early in September, but look at the intensity of this cold front as it moves in by next Thursday, Friday. Temperatures in parts of the central United States 15 to 20 degrees colder than normal. That continues to bleed east as we work throughout next weekend and really lingering around through the first week of September. Now, what starts to happen by the 10th of the month or so, the EPS once again trying to warm the pattern back up. And would you look at that? That looks very similar here to what its forecast in the 11 to 15 day period looked like this time last week, which certainly begs the question, is it just wrong? Is it just off? I think that based off of some of the signals I see in East Asia, we can have a little bit of a moderation, maybe a couple of warmer days in there, but very, very skeptical at this point that we warm this pattern up this much, and it stays this warm and continues to get warmer through the end of the week 2 time frame. Now, I think that one of the reasons for that, and we'll get back to maybe the frost potential here in a moment, is the EPO. And if you've watched our videos, especially throughout the wintertime, we talk about the East Pacific Oscillation a lot. It's really represented by warmth and high pressure up towards Alaska. And the old saying goes, when it gets warm in Alaska, it gets cold in the US. This is the week 2 forecast in the North Pacific from the EPS model. And it's why I remain very skeptical of a bigger warm up, because we still have all this ridging and high pressure here over Alaska. And when that happens, you tend to shoot down colder shots of air into the US. Here's your typical setup. When you get that big high pressure and the warmth to build near Alaska, you naturally are going to pull down cooler air from the Arctic. And I just don't think that data is doing a good job of picking up on this right now. And it's why I think the EPS and the GEFS are a good bit too warm late in the week 2 time frame. Again, that AI model, it moderates things, but it's not nearly as notable as what the EPS and the GEFS are doing. So I would watch for colder trends around that 9th to 11th time frame. Could there be a brief warm up? Yes. And then I think that as we look at the pattern here in another week's time, we have another big cold front that we'll talk about here in a little bit that could be similar to the one we're dealing with next week for the 14th or the 15th of the month. Real quick, guys, before we get into the weeks 3 and 4 forecast, here's a look at the blend of models temperature outlook for next Thursday morning. I want to still keep a very close eye on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of September across the northern plains and the upper Midwest. Right now, data not super aggressive here with the frost signals, but there are certainly some 30s and outlying areas across North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin with this forecast. Given the tendency for data to trend colder as we get closer, and how cold we got just earlier this week up here, we are going to put this out here. We need to monitor for a patchy frost risk across parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan as we close out next week. So something we will be monitoring very, very carefully moving forward. We put this is on the Maps tab in the Clarity platform. Obviously, be sure to stay tuned to your local forecast updates as well for more details on this as we get a little bit closer. Getting into the weeks 3 and 4 time frame and talking a little bit about that next front that I mentioned earlier. Based off the North Pacific, there is another powerful cold front in the cards by about the 14th or the 15th of the month. And so if there is any kind of a moderation period, it's going to happen at the very end of week 2. Again, skeptical that it ends up being as warm as what the current EPS and the GEFS would indicate. In addition to that, the SOI, our Southern Oscillation Index, which is just simply the difference in pressure between Darwin and Tahiti, can give us a good idea of the background state of the atmosphere, consistently positive as we work into the second week of the month and beyond. What does that typically lead to? Well, it leads to cooler than normal temperatures, leads to warmth in the Pacific Northwest, leads to cooler air across the eastern half of the country. In addition to that, it tends to favor drier than normal conditions across the Northwest Plains. Some moisture in the plains should be starting to sound familiar. It's very similar to the next couple of weeks through this area and into the Great Lakes, and then a bit drier across parts of the Ohio Valley. In addition to that, we're starting to see some key trends with the Enso state and the developing, perhaps weak La Nina. Looking at the observations of the ocean temperatures over the last couple of weeks, we have seen a tank in the ocean water temperatures compared to normal the back half of August. In fact, now closer to minus 0.7 degrees Celsius, which is in La Nina territory. In fact, if you take a look at the current temperature anomalies in terms of the map here, you can certainly see the cooler waters beginning to show up. Why is that important? Well, if we look at the correlation for the eastern Enso regions as we get into September, there are some similarities here. It is a little bit warmer south. We'll touch on that here in a few. But you can certainly see it tends to favor some colder air across the north and eastern portion of the United States. It also tends to support the drier risk across parts of the Ohio Valley, maybe parts of the Northwest Plains, and some moisture, although messy, in the middle. Again, very similar to how we look the next couple of weeks. On top of that, another big driver is the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Decadal Oscillation right now is the most negative on record back to 1854. If we look at the correlation over the past 24, 25 years in the United States for a negative PDO, it favors these cold shots of air. And so we are seeing a theme. The background state of the atmosphere right now, along with what the North Pacific is saying and the SOI is saying, favors these shots of colder air. In terms of precipitation, it's drier west. It is a little bit more active, a little bit further east, but in general, I would still say that there are some similarities in the precipitation pattern, especially across the northwestern part of the country where it favors some drier risks. Now, if there is going to be a more consistent warm up, there's going to be a time where the pattern could turn back warmer than normal. Based off the North Pacific, it would come as we work into the last third of September. The signal here for the US, as we work into especially the 20th and beyond, does start to trend a little bit warmer. Again, a little bit hesitant to suggest it's super warm, given all of those other teleconnections we just talked about. But I do think that maybe our more intense cold shots start to wane the last third of the month. If we take a look at some of our top analogs, trying to kind of blend all of these ideas together, here's what they look like for the weeks 3 and 4 time frame. But I want to be very clear. I think that week 3, the 12th to the 18th, can be much colder than week 4. I think that the week 3 time frame, you could expand this colder air all the way kind of through this region in here, and probably some much below normal temperatures across the Great Lakes and the Midwest. As we go into week 4, though, what will start to happen is more of this warmer air and the moderation starts to shift east, and so you end up averaging out something like this. I think it's a time frame where week 3 can be quite cold, week 4 can warm up a little bit warmer than normal. In terms of precipitation, this doesn't look all that surprising. It's probably a nice blend of everything that we showed with the data. Some drier risks, Missouri, Illinois, parts of Indiana, down through the Mississippi River region. Maybe some moisture across parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. With all that in mind, here is what we did for our weeks 3 and 4 forecast, guys. Again, favoring cooler than normal conditions across parts of the Northeast, the Great Lakes, the Midwest. I think week 3 can be quite cold, so don't get me wrong here. If you think back to our outlook on Tuesday, it was quite a bit colder. It's because the week 3 time frame probably is quite a bit colder, but we're also now factoring in a little bit of the warmth in the week 4 time frame. Terms of precipitation, overall, again, matches with all of those analogs pretty well. I think we continue to run drier than normal across parts of the Ohio Valley. I think we are a little bit more active in the far upper Midwest and the Great Lakes, parts of the plains, drier across the Canadian prairies and the Northwest Plains. Again, a little bit more of the same of what we've been dealing with in the short term. Guys, that's all I have for today's forecast. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a fantastic Labor Day weekend.